Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that I feel like doesn't always get the attention that it deserves, and that's mental health during pregnancy.
Mhm.
Pregnancy is so often painted as this blissful experience, but the reality is that mental health challenges are actually incredibly common during this time, and often they're not really spoken about openly. In fact, nearly 1 in 5 women experience anxiety or depression during pregnancy, so that's a pretty significant number.
It really is. And, I think what's so interesting is that these struggles are often hidden beneath this kind of societal expectation of, radiating joy and excitement when you're expecting.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we all see those picture-perfect pregnancy announcements, the
Mhm.
glowing maternity photo shoots. But what about the stories that we don't see? The ones that are filled with anxiety or fear or even sadness?
Yeah, those stories are just as important. And, sometimes even more so. Take Sophie, for example. She was a woman featured in one of the sources that we looked at for this deep dive, and she desperately wanted to be a mother. But when she finally got pregnant, she was hit with this wave of intense sadness and anxiety, and she felt like she was failing before she even began.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. And I bet a lot of women out there can relate to those
Yeah.
feelings, even if they don't talk about it openly. So in this deep dive, we really want to unpack this topic, explore the challenges, the science behind it all, and most importantly, some real actionable solutions.
Absolutely. Because the impact of mental health during pregnancy goes way beyond just emotions. When a mom-to-be is stressed, her body releases cortisol, this powerful stress hormone.
Okay, cortisol, yeah. I've heard of that. But remind me, how does that actually affect things?
Well, studies have shown that elevated cortisol levels during pregnancy can actually increase the risk of preterm birth
Mm.
and low birth weight. And get this, research even suggests a potential link between high maternal stress and a child's cognitive development later on.
Wow, I had no idea the impact was that significant. That's kind of scary to think about, honestly. But what about the flip side? What happens when moms prioritize their mental well-being?
That's where things get really interesting. When you focus on, feeling good, your body actually starts producing those feel-good hormones, like oxytocin, the love hormone.
Ah, yes, oxytocin. Didn't I read somewhere that that helps with bonding and attachment?
You got it. And during pregnancy, it plays a crucial role in healthy fetal development. So you see, taking care of your mental health isn't just about you, it's a powerful act of caring for your baby as well.
That makes so much sense. It's like this beautiful cycle, you
Yeah.
know, where feeling good mentally actually contributes to a healthier pregnancy overall.
Precisely. And speaking of mental health, it's important to acknowledge that the challenges can really take many forms. Our sources point to three main struggles that are incredibly common: prenatal depression, anxiety disorders, and just generally high stress levels.
And I think sometimes people kind of brush those off as just hormones, but it sounds like that's a dangerous oversimplification.
It absolutely is. Dismissing these issues as simply hormonal can have serious consequences. What might seem like pregnancy mood swings could actually be signs of a deeper issue that could potentially escalate after the baby is born.
So what can women do to actually address these challenges? I'm guessing our sources have some practical advice. When I was going through the sources for this deep dive, it really struck me just how easy it is to misunderstand or downplay these mental health challenges. We have this image of the glowing pregnant woman, right? And anything that kind of deviates from that just feels taboo or wrong.
Yeah, it's true. And it's so important, I think, to unpack the specifics of what women might be experiencing. So, for example, prenatal depression, this isn't just a case of the baby blues. We're talking about a serious condition with persistent feelings of sadness, loss of interest, even hopelessness.
So what would you say are some red flags that someone should be watching out for? Because pregnancy comes with all sorts of physical and emotional changes anyway. So how can you tell if it's something more of armor?
That's a great question. Um, One thing that really stands out in the research is changes in sleep patterns. And we're not just talking about, feeling a little more tired than usual. It's either insomnia or sleeping much more than usual. And then there's appetite. Either a huge increase or a decrease can be a warning sign.
Okay, so sleep and appetite. What else?
Well, persistent fatigue, even when you are getting enough rest, is another one. And then there are the kind of mental and emotional signs like difficulty concentrating, feeling worthless, or overwhelmed by guilt.
That sounds like such a heavy burden to carry, especially during what's supposed to be this exciting time.
It can be, and that's why it's so important to remember that, prenatal depression is not a weakness. It's a medical condition, just like any other. and it needs attention and care.
It's not something you can just snap out of it.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of clarifying things, we should probably touch on the difference between prenatal depression and the baby blues, since you mentioned that earlier.
Yes, please. I know there is a distinction, but I'm not exactly sure what it is.
Okay, well, think of it this way. The baby blues are kind of like a quick dip in the emotional pool after childbirth, mainly due to those hormonal shifts. They're very common,
Yeah.
usually mild and tend to fade pretty quickly. Prenatal depression, on the other hand, happens during pregnancy and can linger for a much longer time.
Okay, that's actually really helpful. So it's not just about the timing,
Mm.
but the intensity and the duration of the symptoms.
Exactly. And speaking of different conditions, let's not forget about anxiety disorders. Those can manifest in a variety of ways during pregnancy.
Right. What kind of anxiety are we talking about here? I feel like anxiety is such a broad term.
You're right, it is. Our sources mention generalized anxiety disorder, where you're constantly worrying. There's this underlying sense of fear. And then there's panic disorder, which is marked by these sudden, intense episodes of fear that can be really debilitating. And believe it or not, even specific phobias like a fear of needles or hospitals can either emerge or become much worse during pregnancy.
It's amazing how pregnancy can amplify certain emotions or anxieties. So how would someone know if they're dealing with, an anxiety disorder, as opposed to just the normal jitters that can come with being pregnant?
Well, one thing to look for are physical symptoms. Things like a racing heart, shortness of breath, dizziness, even nausea. These can often be mistaken for, typical pregnancy symptoms. But if they're persistent and accompanied by intense worry, that might be a sign of something more.
Okay, so physical symptoms are one clue. What about the mental or emotional side of things?
On that front, you might see excessive worrying that's difficult to control, restlessness, trouble sleeping, or even a sense of impending doom.
Wow, that sounds really overwhelming. I mean, pregnancy itself is a huge
Yeah.
life change. And then to add, these intense anxieties on top of that.
It is a lot to manage. And the thing is, these anxiety disorders don't just affect a woman's emotional state. They can also have physiological effects. Remember we talked about cortisol?
Oh, right, the stress hormone.
Mm-hmm.
So even just feeling anxious can trigger this whole cascade of physical responses in the body. It all comes back to that mind-body connection, doesn't it?
Exactly. When you're constantly stressed or anxious, your body is pumping out cortisol, which, as we discussed, can have, negative consequences for both mom and baby.
It's like a domino effect. So it's not just about feeling anxious, but it's the very real physical impact that anxiety can have on the pregnancy.
You got it. And that's why acknowledging these issues and seeking support is so critical. Ignoring them won't make them go away, and it can actually make things worse.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about prenatal depression, anxiety disorders, and the impact these conditions can have. But I'm curious, what can women do to manage these challenges? I mean, knowing the signs is one thing, but what about practical solutions?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And thankfully, our sources do have some really helpful advice. They emphasize the importance of building a strong support system. Having people you can talk to who understand what you're going through can make all the difference.
Okay, support is key. What else can women do to kind of proactively manage their mental health during pregnancy? So we've talked about support being key, but are there other things that women can do on their own, to kind of help themselves feel better? I know self-care is something that gets thrown around a lot these days, but what does that actually look like during pregnancy?
Well, one of the things our sources really emphasize is the power of things like mindfulness and meditation. And, the great thing is you don't need to be a meditation guru or anything to benefit from these practices.
That's good to hear. Because I think a lot of people hear meditation, they think, oh gosh, I had to sit in silence for like an hour, which is just not realistic for most pregnant women.
Exactly. You don't have to. Even just taking a few minutes each day to focus on your breath or using a guided meditation app can have a huge impact. It's about finding those little pockets of calm amidst the chaos of it all.
Yeah, I love that. It's about those manageable moments for yourself, which is so important, especially during such a demanding time. What about exercise? I know that in general, exercise can be really good for mental health, but is it safe and is it recommended during pregnancy?
Absolutely. As long as your doctor gives you the green light, moderate exercise can do wonders for both your physical and mental health. And our sources specifically mention prenatal yoga as being incredibly beneficial.
Prenatal yoga keeps coming up. I'm sensing a theme here.
Well, it's not surprising. It's this amazing combination of gentle movement, mindfulness, and relaxation techniques all rolled into one. Plus, it can help prepare your body for labor and delivery.
So it's like a triple win. Physical, mental, and preparing for the big day.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the role of nutrition. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth emphasizing again.
Right. We talked about how food can impact mood.
Mm.
But are there specific things that pregnant women should be focusing on eating to support their mental health?
Well, a balanced diet is always a good starting point, but our sources specifically call out omega-3 fatty acids. These are found in foods like fatty fish, walnuts, flax seeds, and they've been linked to improved mood and brain function.
Interesting. So it's not just about avoiding junk food, but it's about actually actively choosing foods
Mm.
that nourish your mental well-being as well. It's amazing how everything is connected.
It really is. And while, lifestyle changes like these can be incredibly helpful, it's important to remember that sometimes professional help is necessary.
Right. We don't want to give the impression that, everyone can just meditate their way out of
Yeah.
a serious mental health challenge.
Exactly. Therapy, counseling, and even medication, when appropriate, can play a crucial role in managing these conditions. Our sources really emphasize that seeking professional help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
It's about getting the support you need, whatever that looks like for you. I
Right.
love that. So if we were to kind of boil all of this down to one key takeaway, what would you say is the most important message for our listeners today?
I think the overarching message here is that, mental health during pregnancy is not a luxury. It's a vital part of the journey. Recognizing that your emotional well-being is fundamentally connected to both your physical health and the well-being of your baby is huge. And it's about empowering yourself with the knowledge and the resources to navigate this experience with resilience and strength.
That is beautifully said.
Ah.
It's about recognizing that taking care of your mental health is an act of love, both for yourself and for your child. And on that note, what is one small step our listeners can take today to prioritize their mental well-being, whether for themselves or for someone they care about?
That's a great question. Maybe it's as simple as taking, 5 minutes to just do some deep breathing exercises, or reaching out to a friend and just saying, hey, I'm struggling. Or maybe it's sharing this deep dive with someone who might need to hear it. Every little step counts.
I love that. It's a call to action to kind of break the silence and start taking care of ourselves, both individually and as a community.
Yeah.
So on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And remember,